Good morning, boys and girls. I'm going to continue reading Malala this morning. We left off on chapter 9 where it says displaced. Displaced means the prefix dis means not, and placed. So they are not placed where they normally are. Kind of like we are right now. We're not in our normal classroom, so we're displaced into our homes, and that's where we're doing school. That's why it's called distance learning. Okay, so it says, after the New York Times documentary aired, we received messages of support from people all over the world. I saw then how powerful the media can be. For the first time, we knew the story of the girls in the Swat Valley were being heard among the borders of Pakistan, but the army and the Taliban were still fighting. And after what was supposed to be a period of peace, the situation got worse. Once again, Mingora was squarely in the middle. We had stayed through all other trouble and fighting, but this time my mother said we should leave and take shelter in Shangla. I stood on our roof, looking at the mountains, at the alleys where we used to play cricket, trying to memorize every detail in case I never saw my home again. Then I went downstairs to start stuffing clothes into a bag. I packed so fast that I took the pants from one set of shalwar kameez and the top from another, which meant I ended up with things that didn't match. I nearly cried when my mother told me I would have to leave my school books behind. I loved school, and all I cared about were my books. We were children after all, children with childish concerns, even with the war on the way. I enrolled in school in the village, in the same class as my cousin Sumbal. When we arrived, I saw that only 3 girls were in Sumbal's grade. Most of the girls in Shangla stopped going to school after they turned 10. So the few girls who did go were taught alongside the boys. I stood out in the class. I didn't cover my face the way other girls did, and I talked freely and asked questions. So if she stood out because she talked freely and asked questions, what does that tell you about the other girls? How did they act in the class? Oh, how I missed my home, and my old school, and my books, and even Ugly Betty. In May, the army fought the Taliban for 4 days in Mingora. From what we heard on the radio, it was impossible to tell who was winning. By the end, there was hand-to-hand combat on the streets. I tried to picture that. Taliban men fighting in the alley where we played cricket. The army finally announced that it had the Taliban on the run, so we breathed a little easier. But we wondered, where would the Taliban go next? Would they return to the mountains? Would it be a good thing if they returned to the mountains? My 12th birthday took place while we were still waiting to go home. It felt strange. I waited all day for the celebration, but so much had happened that everyone had forgotten. It was hard not to think of how different it had been when I turned 11. I had shared a cake with my friends, there had been balloons, and I had made a wish for peace in our valley. I closed my eyes and made that same wish on my 12th birthday. A year later, she's making the same wish. That means the battle has been going on for over a year. Chapter 10, A Strange Place. After 3 months, we were finally on our way home. As we drove down the mountain pass and saw the Swat River, my father began to weep. When we saw the condition of poor Mingora, we were all in tears. Everywhere we looked, we saw piles of rubble, burned out cars and smashed windows. Stores had broken front windows and their shelves were empty. It seemed that every building was marked with bullet holes. The government had said it was safe to go back, but our hometown still felt like a war zone. Army soldiers peered down at us from rooftops protecting the streets. The bus station, normally filled with brightly colored buses and hundreds of travelers, was deserted because most people were still too afraid to return. Weeds were growing up through the cracks in the pavement, but there was no sign of the Taliban. We had heard that TVs and jewelry had been stolen from the houses surrounding ours, so we held our breath as we saw our overgrown garden, and my father unlocked the gate. I ran to the guest room where I had hidden my books and discovered that they were safe and sound. I said a prayer of thanks and paged through them. How lovely to see my quadratic equations, my social studies notes, and my English grammar book again. After everything we had been through, I began to think that becoming a political leader might be a better choice than becoming a doctor. Our country had so many problems. Maybe someday I could help solve them. So through her experiences, she's changing what she wants to become in the future. I wonder if any of you guys have thought about that, how this experience has changed what you want for your future. SWAT was finally at peace. The army remained, but the shops reopened. Women walked freely in the markets. I planted a mango seed outside our house. I knew it would take a long time for the seed to bear fruit, but it was my way of saying I was full of hope for a long and peaceful future in Mingora. One of my biggest worries in those days was my height. Around the time I turned 13, I stopped growing. Before, I was one of the tallest girls in my class, and now I was among the smallest. I was making a lot of speeches, but I worried that my height made it difficult to get people's attention. In early 2010, our school was invited to take part in an all-district assembly. 60 students from all over SWAT had been chosen as members. They were mostly boys, but 11 girls from my school participated. And when we held an election for speaker, I won. It was strange to stand on the stage and have people address me as Madam Speaker, but I took the responsibility very seriously. The assembly met almost every month for a year, and we passed 9 resolutions. We decided that no child should be forced to work. We asked for help to send disabled and street children to school. We demanded that all the schools destroyed in the Taliban be rebuilt. Once the resolutions were agreed upon, they were sent to officials, and some were even acted on. We were being heard. We were making a difference. It felt good. By early 2011, we had heard about more wrecked schools and about how the Taliban were threatening people who'd spoken out against them. Around the same time, an anonymous letter addressed to my father came to our house. You have spoken against us, and you will face the consequences. If you look at the book, it's in italics to let you know that somebody else said that right there. It was starting to seem as if the Taliban had never really left. I tried to tell myself that this terrible letter was an empty threat, but I still prayed for my father's safety every day. I prayed for my school to remain open and for the bombed out schools to be rebuilt, and I prayed to grow taller. If I was going to become a politician and work for my country, I told God I would have to at least be able to see over the podium. She said the word empty threat. What that means, guys, is that when somebody threatens you, but you know that really nothing's going to happen. One day in October 2011, chapter 11, good news at last. One day in October 2011, my father showed me an email I could hardly believe. I had been nominated for an International Peace Prize. Then I was invited to speak at a conference on education in Lahore, one of Pakistan's largest cities. The chief minister there was starting a network of schools, and to my surprise, he was also giving me an award for my campaign for girls' rights. I wore my favorite pink shalwar kameez to the event and decided that I would tell everyone about how my friends and I had gone against the Taliban's rules and continued going to school secretly. I told the audience the girls of SWAT were and are not afraid of anyone. I had been home barely a week when one of my friends ran into class one day and announced that the government had awarded me Pakistan's first National Youth Peace Prize. I couldn't believe it. That day, so many journalists descended on our school. It was a madhouse. I still hadn't grown an inch by the award ceremony, but I was determined to be heard. When the Prime Minister presented me with the award, I presented him with a list of demands, including a request that he rebuild the schools Fazlullah destroyed and that the government established a girls' university in Swat. In that moment, I knew I would become a politician. So I could take action and not just ask for help from others. As a politician, you get to make the laws and get in on meetings where you discuss how things are going to change. When it was announced that the prize would be awarded every year to someone new and be named the Malala Prize in my honor, I noticed a frown on my father's face. In our country's tradition, we don't name things like this after people while they are alive, only after they have died. He was a bit superstitious and thought it was a bad omen. I may have been getting attention from around the world, but I was still the same old Malala to my brothers, who still fought with me and teased me and wrestled with me for the TV remote. I wondered what my friends thought about all these awards. We were a very competitive group after all. Would Moniba take up with a new best friend while I was away? But on my first day back at school, I entered the room and saw all my friends gathered around a cake, shouting, "Surprise!" They had collected money and bought a white cake with chocolate icing that read, "Success Forever." My dear friends only wanted to share in my success. I knew in my heart that any one of us could have achieved what I had. I was lucky I had parents who encouraged me despite the fear we all felt. "Now you can get back to your schoolwork," Madame Miriam said as we finished our cake. Malala's being very humble. She's saying that it could have been anybody. And here's the picture. You know, there's not a lot of pictures in this book, so it means a lot. And that is the end of today's reading. We are stopping at chapter 12. I will begin chapter 12 tomorrow. Hope y'all have a good day. Don't forget to do your work. Bye.